Hello everybody! By the title of this video, you can probably tell what I am going to be talking about, and yes, you guessed it, I am going to be talking about bilingual education. The reason why I have chosen this topic is because it is very personal to who I am. I am an immigrant. I came here to Canada when I was 6 years old, and therefore I am also bilingual. I speak fluent English and Spanish, or Inglés y Español. And a couple of years ago in another education class, I heard about the topic of bilingual education in the United States, and it made me really interested because it connected to who I am as a person and who I want to be as an educator.
What is bilingual education anyways? Bilingual education is a dual language program where students are taught school subjects in their mother tongue first, and then taught the same material in a second language so that they can better understand what is being said in a second language.
As I mentioned previously, this topic matters a lot to me, and I find it is very important because as an educator, I want to be able to help immigrant children become more acquainted with the culture that they are in, but also to be able to retain their native culture and native language. I feel that in the education system nowadays, a lot of the students are assimilated really quickly into Canadian culture, and they sort of begin to lose their own culture, their mother tongue, and they lose their ties to who they were and to their own families. I feel that bilingual education would allow children to become more invested in what they're learning because they are surrounded by people who understand where they come from and who understand their point of view. If we can begin to embrace other cultures in the classroom and to allow other students to bring in their own native tongue and their own native culture, then we can begin to create more tolerance in the classroom environment. My biggest worry as an educator and as an immigrant myself is that the Western education system, as it is right now, is slowly starting to take all over the world. This is not an exaggeration by any means, but with the creation of more and more international schools, there is a spread of more and more Western sort of thinking and Western sort of culture and Western language, which is mainly the English language. I fear that if we allow Western education to continue on its path, soon we will begin to lose different cultures, different language, and we will lose the ability as people and as human beings to appreciate each other for all the differences that we have. I began my research on bilingual education by focusing on what had been done in the United States because this is where I originally found the article where it talked about bilingual education. Due to the high number of Mexican immigrants, mainly in the American Southwest, the United States in 1968 passed the Bilingual Education Act as a way to allow students to be taught in their native language of Spanish while simultaneously learning English as their second language. When I shifted my research into Canada, what I found was really interesting. The one thing that we have to realize is that Canada is officially bilingual. In 1963, the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism was created as a way to ease francophone tensions in Quebec. This commission advised the Canadian government to allow minority populations to educate their children in their native language as long as there was a large population. This eventually led to Canada becoming a bilingual country in French and English and allowed more funding to be put towards francophone schools. However, what I have found out is that because Canada is an officially bilingual country in both English and French, then this impedes other bilingual programs from really rising to the top and really become prevalent in the school system. As of right now, the Canadian government wants people to learn English and French because we are a bilingual country, but even then, most of us don't even know French in the first place. Whenever bilingual programs are offered, they are mainly aimed at students who either want to complete their high school requirements of a second language, or they just want the opportunity to become more advanced and look for more job opportunities. The BC curriculum does have booklets available for both teachers and parents, talking about the importance of celebrating different cultures, ethnicities, and languages to create tolerance in the classroom, yet they never explicitly mention bilingual education in the way that I have defined it, as a way for students to be able to retain their culture and their native languages. I was able to find a couple of bilingual programs available for students in BC that taught languages other than French, One of these programs was the Mandarin Bilingual program, which was created in 2008. It was mainly available in the Vancouver district for students who wanted to learn Mandarin. However, the kids that were accepted into these programs had to have English as their native languages and could not speak Mandarin in the first place. Another bilingual program that I found was actually created just last year in 2016. This program was aimed at students who wanted to learn how to speak Spanish. The goal of this program was never to focus on the kids who actually knew Spanish and who wanted to retain their own Spanish culture and language, but it was focused on the economic partnership between BC and Spain. Lastly, the other bilingual program that I was able to find was located in Surrey, which allowed students to learn Punjabi as a second language. However, the Punjabi language program is actually marketed as a way for students to meet their high school requirements for a second language. What I have learned is that most of these bilingual programs that are created appear to be very helpful for students who want to learn a second language, but they mainly are helpful for the economy, not the actual students themselves. What I found surprising after all this research is that although Canada is a multicultural country, it does not offer a lot of services that allow students to retain their native language and culture, which is something that a multicultural country should be doing. Through my research, I also found out that bilingual education does not actually impede students from succeeding academically, but it actually helps them with cognitive thinking. However, my opinion of bilingual education began to change when I started my interviews.
I began the interview process by speaking with my dad first, because as immigrants ourselves, it made me curious to know my dad's opinion on a program that could help current and future immigrants. When I asked him about what he thought of the concept of bilingual education, he surprised me by telling me that he did not agree with the idea of bilingual education, because he believes that children need to assimilate as quickly as possible into Canadian society and culture. He views immigration as being a trade-off. Moving to a new country for a better life means that people will not be able to retain all aspects of their culture. Although he does believe that retaining parts of your own culture and language is important in creating your identity, he thinks that it is up to the parents to teach their children their culture and mother tongue. Each parent and family has a responsibility to teach their children, not the teachers themselves. The next person I interviewed was my sister, because she is studying to become a teacher like I am, and being an immigrant herself, she has a unique perspective on what it is like to grow up in the Canadian education system. I started the interview by telling her my own definition of bilingual education, and she believes that bilingual education can be a helpful way to aid students and parents in becoming accustomed to a Canadian way of life and to opening up a conversation on multiculturalism in Canada. However, she also expressed her concern about placing children in separate classrooms, because this might cause kids to become separated from their peers, which will only make kids' differences become more prominent, instead of creating tolerance in the classroom. She also voiced her concern about placing older children in bilingual classrooms that might cause them to feel forced to identify with their own culture when they might not feel as attached to it as they believe they should. When I asked her what type of resources needed, she had no definitive answer, but believed that some sort of resource needs to be created to raise more awareness on how Canadians view multiculturalism and to try to create more conversations on the topics of racism and exclusion in the classroom. Lastly, I interviewed a current professor of mine at SFU. He told me that he really liked the idea of bilingual education because he is a strong believer that Western education has taken over other languages and cultures. However, he does believe that bilingual education would be hard to implement into the current education system because it would require too many changes in the curriculum. What he believes would be most effective is to encourage more bilingual teachers to teach in Vancouver schools, because he believes that representation is the most important, so that first, the students are able to see people who speak their language in positions of power, and secondly, so that students who may not speak English can still participate in the classroom with the help of a bilingual teacher. Ultimately, he believes that there needs to be more information available for teachers to provide them with alternatives to the current BC curriculum so they can address issues of westernization in the education system and in their own classrooms. He believes that learning begins in the house with a child's native language, which should continue throughout schooling. After finishing my interviews, I realized that bilingual education was going to be a hard thing to implement in Vancouver schools and maybe not the type of program that the education system needs right now. Because of this, I decided to create a website as my resource. My website, titled Vancouver Multilingual Education, is a place where teachers, parents, students, and community members can go on to learn more about bilingual education, but also to participate in starting a conversation that needs to be had about including more resources for immigrant students to support the learning and celebration of their culture and language. What makes my resource a bit different is that I have also created a podcast that goes along with the website to give community members a voice. What I hope to accomplish with the podcast is to allow people from the community to listen to podcasts by other people in their language so that they can connect with members of their community and be able to express their opinion on what they believe is lacking in the education system. Each podcast will also be transcribed so people who do not speak that language can also understand what is being said. Initially, most of the podcast will be me speaking about issues regarding the education system until we get more voices on board. I feel that language can unite people and communities, so a podcast is a perfect way to bridge the distance between people. I also find that people are always on the go, so if they can listen to the podcast while on the bus or driving, then this is an accessible way for them to get a feel for what is happening. Ultimately, my website and my podcast have been created as a way for a collaborative conversation to begin on the issue of multiculturalism in the classroom that begins with the people who are actually affected by what is happening in schools, so that hopefully, with enough knowledge and support, programs like bilingual education may actually become a reality in Vancouver.
Through this process, I became more aware of how hard it would actually be to implement a program like bilingual education in the current curriculum. The problem stems from people's own perception of who should actually be teaching the kids their native language and who should actually be helping them retain their culture. Should it be the responsibility of the parents or should it be the responsibility of the teachers? There is also the issue of how we can help students from different cultures and from different languages. There are not enough teachers who speak a second language to help all of these kids out. I also found that even though it is crucial that students are able to retain their culture and their identity, there is the issue of whether we should actually take them out of the classroom and put them in another environment and sort of label them as the other. I believe that bilingual education brings out many current issues that we are facing in our society today, one of them being assimilation versus retaining your own culture. As educators, we have a responsibility to be aware of these issues and to talk about them and to be aware that kids are losing their ties to their own countries. Before I began this process, I thought bilingual education was the answer to all these problems. However, through my research and the interviews that I had, I have sort of come to realize that in the current education system, especially in BC, it is very hard to implement such a program. I feel that through my research, the best that I can do is to create a place where minorities' voices can be heard and we can really start talking about what it means to be Canadian. I believe that if I were to continue working in bilingual education and creating more awareness towards it, I would want my website to spread to other school districts and eventually to all over Canada. I truly believe that in Canada we have lost the concept of multiculturalism. We have stopped talking about what it actually means and what we actually need to do to help students retain their culture and create a multicultural country. I feel that through my website and my podcast, this could be a springboard for people, even educators, to get ideas on how to start the conversation. I would even hope that some people might even be motivated to create their own programs to try and tackle these same issues that I'm trying to bring forth. I truly believe that schools are a great way to expand on ideas and to really create change. And so I feel that my website and my podcast could really influence people to bring more of those ideas into the classroom so that we could create a real good conversation around the topic, to have students be open about their own cultures and their own points of views, and so that we could create more tolerance all around Canada. As educators, we need to treat students as the people that they are, with a broad history, with cultural ties, with native languages. We need to understand that students do not come into the classroom as a blank slate, but they come in with many thoughts and perceptions of the world around them.